Parshas Truma and Tetzaveh, we were told to make the Mishkan and the Klei HaMishkan and the Big Day Kahuna. And the Torah continues in Parshas Ki Sisa with the mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel that should be collected from every Ben Esrim Shona V'Mala, and from these Shkolim we will bring the Karbonis Tzibur in the Mishkan. Then the Torah talks about making the Shemen HaMishcha, with which we're going to be Mosheich the Klei HaMikdosh and the Koyanim. And then the Torah talks about preparing the Ketores. Then the Torah talks about Shabbos, and that's also connected with the story of the Mishkan, as Rashi says, that the Afal Pisha Tihi Yuridufim Uzrizim Bezrizos Hamalache Shabbos Alti Doche Mipaneha. In other words, so this is also coming in the context of Meleches HaMishkan. But then, abruptly, suddenly, before Moshe Rabbeinu has a chance to organize the people for the Binyan HaMishkan, everything falls apart. Not only that, I say we don't really know what the Chet HaEgel was about, but we do know that this sin is considered the sin of all sins that changed the course of our history. Nothing will ever be the same. As Chazal say, the luchos wouldn't have been broken. We would have learned Torah and we wouldn't forget. We would have Gerus min hagolius. Everything changed until the end of days. We're correcting this sin. Chazal say that every generation pays its part for the Chet HaEgel. Beyond Pakti Ufakadati. But nevertheless, in spite of the fact that the Chet HaEgel caused the irreversible damage, our connection with Torah and our relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom will never be the same as it was until the end of days. But in Pshutei Shel Mikra, we really don't see it. Adarabba, Moshe Rabbeinu davens for Klal Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepts his tefillah, and we get the luchos once again. But not only that, immediately afterwards, the Torah continues from exactly the point that we were at. In other words, the parshas of Vayakel and Pikudei talk about the actual carrying out of the commandments that were given in Parshas Truma and Parshas Tetzaveh and Parshas Ki Sisa. That means it's not so clear if this was the chronological order of events. The Ramban in the beginning of Vayakel holds that it is. That the Chet HaEgel was where it appears in the Seder HaParshas. If the Moshe Rabbeinu was told to make the Mishkan and tell Klal Yisrael to do so in Parshas Truma, Tetzaveh, and Ki Sisa, and before it was actually done in Parshas Vayakel and Pikudei, that's when the Chet HaEgel took place, as it appears in the Seder HaTorah. Rashi in our Parsha Lamed Aleph Ches says, Ein muchtem u'mu'ucher b'Torah. The Maisa HaEgel, Rashi says, was Koidim litzivui meleches hamishkan yomim rabim. So the real order is that the Egel came before Parshas Truma. The principle of Ein Mukdam U'Mu'acher B'Torah is based on the fact that Torah is not a book of history. It's Torah is a sefer of Horah, of instruction. So the Seder of Torah is really a Seder of instruction. So that I say, if according to the Ramban, we need to understand the Seder that things happened, all the more so according to Rashi, we need to understand what the Torah is coming to teach us by putting the Egel in between Parshas Truma Tetzaveh and the beginning of Ki Sisa and Vayakel Pikudei. What's the meaning of inserting the Egel over here? So I think the simple message, Mustama, and the most basic message is that true, we failed and we failed miserably. But even when somebody fails in the worst possible way, he shouldn't get stuck. Immediately after the Chet Egel, we pick up from where we left off. Where were we holding? We were holding by the tzivui to make a mishkan. And vayakel Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael vayoyim aleim zeh hadover she'atziva Hashem lasos. In the Yerushalmi, in the end of Peah, there's a very beautiful illustration of this idea, because the Yerushalmi says that Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish went to bathe in the Chamei Tveria. Hoga boin chad miskein. Some poor person met them on the way into the Merchotz, and he said to them, "Zechoin be zoiche to do a mitzvah with me. In other words, give me tzedakah. Amrulei ki chazrun. We'll give you when we come out of the bit." So the Yerushalmi goes on that when they came out, they found him, he was laying there dead. So we can only imagine what that did to Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. I mean, they postponed giving him tzedakah, and they come out of the Merchotz, and he died the of hunger. But the Yerushalmi tells us, Amru, hoyel v'loy zachinan bei b'chayov. Since we weren't zoiche to do a mitzvah with him b'chayov, in other words, we didn't give him tzedakah while he was alive, netapel bei b'misuse. Let's take care of him now that he's dead. And they started trying to be koiver him. They're going to bury him. They're going to bury him. So, I mean, it seems like a very cold-blooded response. I mean, they just almost killed somebody, right? I mean, they didn't give him the tzedakah and he died, and now they say, okay, so we weren't zoiche b'chayov, let's be zoiche b'misasei, and let's bury him. I mean, that's their response. And then it says what happened, ki metaplun bei, as they were preparing him for burial, ashkechun kis molei dinrin tolui bei. They found that he had a purse a wallet full of dinrim. So he wasn't poor, he was a rich man. He was just pretending to be poor. Amru, hadad amr bavo amr baloza. This is what Rebavo amr baloza said. We should be thankful to those Ramoim amongst the Aniyim, the people that pretend to be Aniyim. So we would be guilty. But what is this story coming to tell us? How are we supposed to understand this cold-blooded response that when they see that he's dead, they say, okay, so we didn't give him tzedakah when he was alive, let's bury him. I think the idea is that even if somebody failed, and maybe even dafka when a person failed, he's not supposed to stop. In other words, remorse is very important. I mean, the tshuva he'll need to do. But the first thing is to do what needs to be done now. If somebody's failure in the past will cause him to become paralyzed and not be able to do what needs to be done now, so that's Aveira, Goireres Aveira. Yeah, so that's not a tshuva. That's Hoisofas Chet Pesha. So Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokish, the first thing is that they're going to do what needs to be done now. They're going to deal with the past later. But right now, the man needs to be buried. In other words, Avada, we shouldn't move on as nothing happened. It needs to be dealt with. The past needs to be dealt with. But first of all, we have to move forward and do now what needs to be done now. In this particular case, it was Nizbar to Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokish, after they made sure not to get stuck, it became clear that they weren't nichshel mi'ikara de milsa. Nothing even happened. The man didn't die because of them. Obviously, it's not always so, right? Sometimes we are nichshel and it's a real kisholoin. But the message is a message for everyone that has a michshol, everyone that fails, that he has to make sure that the failure should not paralyze him. and shouldn't bring him to fail again and again. And he should continue to do what needs to be done. So it could be that that's why the Torah puts the story of the Egel between the Tzivui for Hakamas HaMishkan and the actual building of the Mishkan. In other words, that in spite of the fact that in the second half of Parshas Ki Sisa everything turns upside down, but in the beginning of Parshas Vayakhel, Moshe Rabbeinu picks up exactly where he left off, because whatever happened, happened. We have to continue to do what needs to be done. But this is not all. After the Chet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Lech alei mizeh, go ascend from here. Yeah, Lech alei mizeh, ato v'ha'om asher ha'elisa me'eretz Mitzrayim, elo oretz asher nishbati la'Avram li'Yitzchak u'li'Yaakov, etc. So what's alei mizeh? Rashi says Eretz Yisrael gevoy ha'mikol ha'aretz. So he says Eretz Yisrael is the highest place on the globe. L'kach nemar alei. Therefore, the Torah uses the term alei, ascend. Okay, then Rashi says davar acher, another pshat. Pesha omar loy b'shas hakas leich raid. Since the Rebbeinu Shalom said to Moshe Rabbeinu, b'shas hakas leich raid ki shiches amcho omar loy b'shas rotzoin leich alei. Before he told him to descend, now he tells him to ascend. So according to the second pshat, we're not just saying ascend from here in the geographical sense, but it also has a meaning of ascend from here or from this, mizeh, ascend from this in the spiritual sense. Lech alei mizeh, which means that the setback really created new opportunities for growth. Lech alei mizeh. As we will see in the psukim right afterwards, it says, "V'shilachti lefonecha malach, v'geirashti es haknani, v'emori, v'achiti, v'aprizi, etc. El eretz zovas cholov udvosh, ki loy ale bekirbecha, ki am kshei orefota penacholcha baderech." So Rashi says, "El eretz zovas cholov udvosh," and the omer l'chol aloisam. I'm telling you to bring them up to the Eretz Zavas Cholav Udvosh. Ki loy ele bekirbecha, lochein ani yomer. Since I'm not going to ascend bekirbecha, the Rebbeinu Shalom is saying, lochein ani yomer, v'shilachti lefonecha malach. Ki am kshei oref oto, uksheshchinosi bekirbechem atem mamrim bi. Marba ani aleichem zam. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol is removing himself from Klal Yisrael. Ki ele bekirbechem. I will not ascend among you. Lo ele bekirbechem. So that's the Pashut Pshat. But you know, the Targum Onkelos says, Arei loy asalek shchinosi mi beinoch. I will not remove my shchina from among you. As if it would say in the pasuk, Ki loy ele mikirbecha. But it doesn't say that. It says, Ki lo ele bekirbecha, which means I will not ascend among you. I mean, so it's obvious that this is a negative statement, Ki lo ele bekirbecha. As it says in the next pasuk, Vayishma ha'omad es hadavar hara hazeh, vayisabolu, v'lo yishosu ish et yoyolav. Rashi says, what's the davar hara? She'ein hashchina shoira u'mahaleches imam. So how does the Targum teach Ki lo ele bekirbecha in a positive sense? Arei loy asalek shchinosi mi beinoin, mi beineichoin. So it's quite astounding, I have to admit. The Ramban says, "Bekama mekaymes," that the derech of Onkelos is to be mefarish the inyan and not the tevois. It's not a literal translation, but it's a pirush ha'inyan. No. But Savada, the literal translation is Lo Ela Bekirbecha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not ascend among them. And on the surface, this is taka bad news. Vayishma ha'om es hadavar hazeh, es hadavar hara hazeh v'yisabolu. But there's also good news over here. The Targum is telling us in the Pirush Ha'inyan. that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will continue to lead us in a way that it will be long lasting. In other words, if the HaKadosh Baruch Hu will ascend among us, so it won't last, because it'll come to Zam, as Rashi says, because of our misbehavior, because of our being an Am Kshei Yoref. But Dafke, if he'll lead us in a more concealed way, it'll be long-lasting. That is the Pirush HaInyan. The Pirush HaInyan, the Pirush HaTevis is Lo Yela B'Kirbecha. But the Pirush HaInyan is Lo Yasalik Shchinasi Mi'Beineichon. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to lead you in a way that will have a long-lasting relationship. And Bemis HaZoy Vayis in the Targum Yonis Ben Azil, the Targum Yonis Ben Azil, it says, Arum, Leis Efshe de Isalik Shchinas Yikori Mi'Beineichon. It's impossible for me to remove my Shchina from you. Baram, Lo Yehei Yikori Shorei B'Medor Mashri Seihoin. However, my covet will not be shoire in their b'medor mashri seyon. So in other words, it really means both. It means I will not be among them, but I will lead them in a way that it'll be long lasting, and that's the hini anechi sheleach maloch lefanecha. And immediately afterwards it says Moshe yikach esa oyhel v'noto lo michutz lamachane harcheik min hamachane. Rashi already makes the connection between Moshe's removing his oil and putting it michutz lamachane and what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Ki loy ele bekirbechem. So it would seem that Moshe Rabbeinu's taking his oil and putting it outside the machane also has a dual meaning. In the end of the parsha, we learn that when Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from the mountain, Koran or Ponov, right, the skin of his face became radiant, to the point that Vayiru migeshes Elov, they feared to approach him, and therefore Vayitein al Ponov masve, he placed a mask on his face. But when did he have the mask on his face, and when did he remove the mask? So if you look in the Psukim, you see that when he came to talk to the Yidden, he removed the mask. Only when he finished talking to them, he put the mask back on. L'chara, it should be punkt faket. I mean, when he's talking to them, they're afraid of looking at his face. So when he's talking to them, he should put on the mask. When he's not talking to them, there's no reason for him to wear the mask. But over here we see punkt faket, that when is he wearing the mask? When he's not talking to them. When he's talking to them, he's not wearing the mask. So the Bina Le'itim, it's a classic Drush Sefer from the Baal Gidulei Truma, the Reb Azariah Figo. So he says that the Masve was really in order to preserve the Vayiru Migeshes Elov. He says if they would see him all the time, they would get used to it, and they would lose that awe. But therefore Moshe Rabbeinu wears the mask. Only when he's talking to them, he takes it off. But otherwise, they can't see him, because they can't see the Koran or Ponov, in order that hergish should not get lost. So it would seem that all this is connected to the new type of leadership that comes into being after the Chet HaEgel. In other words, we won't be overexposed to Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayosim al Ponov Masve, and only the Mavakesh Hashem will go out to the Moshe's oil, which is Michutz LaMachane. He's not so available anymore. And Kaviyachol, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, Kiloi ele bekirbecha. The divine presence also won't be so open, won't be so golui, won't be so felt. In other words, the hester ponim, the concealment of Moshe Rabbeinu's face and Kaviyachol, the Rebbeinu Shalom's face, creates a space for self-effort. V'hoya kol mevakesh Hashem yetze el oyel moed. Yeah, so it's a lech alei mizeh that bemis you can ascend from this. The kiloi ele bekirbecha, which says in the next pasuk, is because dafke the loy ele bekirbecha enables an aliyah. It enables that mizeh we will be able to reach greater heights. We can grow from the failure. You know the Ibn Ezra in this week's parsha brings in the name of Hagoin. Hagoin Mistama is the Reb Saadia Goin, but I'm not sure. I think usually it's Reb Saadia Goin. But anyway, he brings in the name of Hagoin that the second luchas were nichbodim min harishonim. What's nichbodim? Nichbodim, more dignified, more covered. I don't know how to translate that into English. Nichbodim min harishonim. But the Ibn Ezra says it's impossible. I mean, the Rishonim, the Luchas, the first Luchas, not only was the Michtov Eloikim, but the Luchas themselves, the tablets, were Maase Eloikim. Whereas, as far as the second Luchas are concerned, it says that only the Michtov was Michtov Eloikim, but the Luach, Moshe Rabbeinu made, Psol Lecho, Shnei Luchas Avonim Karishonim. So how can they go and say that the Luchos Hashniim are Nichbodim Min Harishonim? So asks the Ibn Ezra. You know, the truth is the guy that's quoted in the Ibn Ezra, he says that in 7 ways the second Luchos are more Nichbod than the Rishonim. And the fourth of the 7 is, he says that the Luchos, the first Luchos, were Michtav Elokim and Maise Elokim, whereas the second Luchos were only Michtav Elokim, but it was Maise Yedei Moshe. So this thing that the Ibn Ezra says makes it impossible to say that the second Luchos are more Nichbod. The Goyen actually says this is a reason for why the second Luchos are more Nichbod than the Rishonim, because Moshe Rabbeinu made them. So what does he mean to say? L'chorah, because kavod comes through self-effort. You can't force kavod. I mean, if you force somebody to give you kavod, it's not a kavod b'chlal. Kavod only comes about through the self-effort of the mechabed. And therefore, the Luchos Rishonim and the whole Maimed Har Sinai L'chatchila was kafa aleim har kegigis. The Luchos Rishonim, which were totally the Rebbeinu Shalom's doing, so there's no kavod. The Luchos Shniim, where Moshe Rabbeinu's self-effort is involved, Psol Lecho, Shnei Luchos Avonim Korishonim, that's Nichbod Min Ha-Rishonim. Salderech, there's a Gemara in Chulin Daf Samach that says, Yehi Chvoid Hashem La'olam. When was that said? Yehi Chvoid Hashem La'olam, when the Deshoim were Nosu Kal V'chomer Ba'atzmam, by the Maaseh Bereishis, that they should come out leminoi kal v'chomer from the eitzim. So in any case, you see that self-effort is what brings about kavod. So you know, by the Luchos Shniim, it says in the beginning of Kapitel Lamed Daled, Vayom Hashem al Moshe psol lecho shnei luchos avonim korishonim v'goymer v'heyei nochoin laboiker v'olisa ba'boiker el har Sinai v'goymer. The ish loy yale imach. V'gam ish al yeiro b'choloho. So Rashi says, the ish loy yale imach harishonos al yedei shehoyu b'tshuos v'koilos v'kehilo sholto ba'ehen ayin hara. Ein l'cha yofa min atznius. As to say that the Luchos, the first Luchos, were broken because they were given so publicly and with such fanfare. And Ein L'cha Yofa Min Atznius, the Luchos Shniim, in order that they should last, they were given B'tznius, V'ish Loy Yale Imach. Exactly what Ayin Hara means, we don't obviously know, but according to what we're saying, It could be that the drama of the koilis and brokim of the first luchis was really a divine revelation in a measure that doesn't leave room for denial, right? Kafa aleim harkegigis. It didn't leave room for personal effort. And then we're totally dependent on the revelation. And when Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't appear exactly when we expected him to appear, so we can't deal with the lo yodanu mahoyaloi. Everything collapses. And the luchas have to be broken. That's because we were over dependent on revelation. Therefore, the second luchas are given betzino. It's not so revealed. There's a need to be mishtadel, psol lecho, and then such luchas have a kiyum. Such luchas are long lasting, and this corresponds with what we know from the Yerushalmi in Shkolim, Perik Vav, that Beis Halevi is marich about. That if not for Shviras Haluchas, we would have had all of Torah B'Ksav. There would be no Torah Shebal Peh, and it's only because of Shviras Haluchas that we have Torah Shebechsav and Torah Shebal Peh. Now, what's Torah Shebal Peh all about? Torah Shebal Peh is all about a Torah that we have to reveal with our own efforts. It's not so clear. It's not so obvious. It's not so apparent. I mean, the Dvar Hashem and Torah Shebal Peh is something that we're still trying to figure out. Yeah, so Mamela, that's the Maila of the concealment of Torah that brings us, that creates the space for self-effort. You know, there's a machlokes rishonim, if only on Shabbos there's an neshama yisera, or also on Yontif. There are those that show that prove that from the fact that we don't make a birchas besamim on Mitzvah Yontif. And you know, rishonim say, it's not clear where in Chazal there's a source for this, but in rishonim it says that the birchas habsamim comes to give us chizuk at the time that we lose the neshama yisera. So they say that if we don't smell besamim on Mitzvah Yontiv, that lechora shows that only on Shabbos there's a neshama yisera, and on Yontiv there's no neshama yisera. But lefizeh, so lechora Mitzvah Shabbos that goes into Yontiv, since on Shabbos there's a neshama yisera and on Yontiv there's no neshama yisera, we should smell besamim Mitzvah Shabbos that goes into Yontiv. Well, we don't smell besamim on Shabbos that goes into Yontiv. So Tosfos and the Rashbam in Psachim say that from the fact that we don't smell besamim on Mitzvah Shabbos that goes into Yontiv, we see that on Yontiv there's also an neshama yisera, and that's why Mitzvah Shabbos that goes into Yontiv we don't make a birchas besamim. But the question is, so why on Motzei Yom Tov don't we make a birchas habsamim? So in the Sefer Emunah B'Tachin, that's meyuchas to the Ramban, Perek Chaf Aleph, he says that there is a neshama yisera in Yom Tov, but the neshama yisera of Yom Tov never goes away, and therefore we don't make birchas besamim on Motzei Yom Tov. So what's that supposed to mean? I mean, avada the kedusha of Shabbos is a greater kedusha than the kedusha of Yom Tov. The kedusha of Shabbos is mechayiv skila. If you're mechalel Shabbos, Yom Tov is only a lav. Shabbos is also in all malachas. Yom Tov is only Yom Tov is muter malachas of eichel nefesh. So why would we say that the neshama yisera of Yom Tov is somehow more powerful and it doesn't go away after Yom Tov? So the Shem Shmuel brings in several places in the name of his father, the Avnei Nezer. And the pshat is like this: Shabbos is mekacha v'kaima. Shabbos happens on its own. Every seventh day is Shabbos. Shabbos is a matana, as the Gemara says in Shabbos Daf Yud. Matana achas yeshli bebeis gnozai v'Shabbos shmo. He says a matana in a sarusa de la'ela, an awakening from above, is only exists while it's here. As soon as it's over, it's over. I mean, a matana, when you have it, you have it. It's taken back, it's taken back. So he says, whereas Yom Tov is the Chisroel, the Kachinu Lizman. Yom Tov comes about through Kiddush Bezdin. In Yom Tov, we play a role in making Yom Tov into Yom Tov, and therefore, since it comes through self-effort, since it comes through Isarusa de la Sata, an awakening from beneath, so then we have a kinyan in the Kedusha. Then it becomes something that we can hold on to even when the Yom Tov is over. That's why the Neshama Yisera of Yom Tov is long-lasting. So this is really the same difference between the Luchas Rishonim and the Luchas Shniyim. The Luchas Rishonim, which were a Matana, which were Michtav Elokim and Maisa Elokim, so they were Nishtabru. Whereas the second Luchas that Moshe Rabbeinu was Psal Lecha, that came about through the tshuva of Klal Yisrael, the Salachti Kidvarecha, those Luchas we can hold on to forever. There's Kama Rishonim that say that even though we paskin that Kedusha Rishonim of Eretz Yisrael was Kitchel L'Shaita V'loi Kitchel Asid Lavoi, that the Kedusha was over when the Golus came. Nevertheless, the Kedusha Shniya is Kitchel L'Shaita, the Kitchel Asid Lavoi, the Kedusha Shniya doesn't go away. So, Bimei Yeshua Kibush Oretz was with Nisim Gluyim against the 31 kings. But Bimei Ezra, the Kedusha Shniya came about through was an aliyah that was done. Was the effort of the Jews, and with the Rishyon Ha'umos, and without Nisim Gluyim, as the Gemara says in Brachas Daf Daled. But Dafka, the second Kedusha, which came about without Nisim Gluyim, which involved more of our efforts, that Kedusha lasts forever. Whereas the first Kedusha, which was with Nisim Gluyim, so that's it only lasts as long as it lasts. So that's the Leich Alei Mizeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe after the Chet HaEgel that you can actually transform the Leich Reid Kishiches Amcha, go descend. You can transform that into a Leich Alei Mizeh. Go ascend from here or from this. The failure created new opportunities. Now we can build a relationship from far. Now we can build a connection that will be everlasting. The Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva, Amru Chachamim Mokem Shebalei Tshuva Oimdim Boi, Ein Tzadikim Gemurim Yecholim Lamoid Boi, Koloimar, Ma'aloson G'doilo, Mimaylas Eila Shaloichotu, Me'olam, Mipnei Shem Koifshim Es Yitzrom Yesemehem. Which means that the more effort, because the Balei Tshuva, so the pshat is that it requires more effort, and the more effort, the greater the person. That's the Makom Shebalei Tshuva Oimdim. We say Heima Koru v'Nafolu, v'Anachnu Kamnu v'Nesoidon. So they dropped to their knees and they fell. But what about us? We arose. Vanis oidod, and we were invigorated. So what's the pshat? Vaistoy said we also fell. Obviously, we also fell because we say vanachnu kamnu, we arose. So we also fell. So the difference between the us and the them is not that they fell and we didn't fall. We also fell. The difference is Hema Koruv and Afolu. They dropped to their knees and they fell, and that's the end of the story. I mean, they despaired. V'anachnu kamnu, we arose. If we arose, we can even reach a madrega of anasoidod to become invigorated. So Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, when they moved forward, it became clear that the past never happened. He wasn't a poor man; he didn't die because of them. But everyone who has the ability to move forward, right? It could give new meaning to the past. Klal Yisrael moves forward after the Chet HaEgel, and they continue immediately with Vayakol Moshe, and in this way they turn the breakdown into a breakthrough. In other words, from here on, we have a different type of relationship with Torah, with the Rebbeinu Shalom, but it's an everlasting relationship. And this is really the tikkun hasholem that comes that comes about only through the avodah of the post-Cheta Egel relationship. Okay, Rabbi Sai, having said that, I wish you all a guten Shabbos.